Generative AI it's everywhere now. And the classroom is definitely no exception. But its arrival has kicked off this huge debate. Is this thing a revolutionary personal tutor for every single student, or is it just the ultimate shortcut machine? Okay, let's really dive into this.
This is the big question, right? It's what everyone's asking. Does having a tool like this at your fingertips actually improve how you learn? Or does it kinda encourage a mental laziness that ends up hurting you in the long run? It's a debate with some really passionate arguments on both sides.
So, to get past all the opinions and speculation, researchers decided to put this whole debate to the test. They basically framed it as a scientific showdown between two competing ideas, two totally different hypotheses about what AI is actually doing in the classroom.
Okay, so on one hand, you've got the tutor hypothesis. The idea here is that AI could be a total game changer, right? Giving students personalized, instant help whenever they get stuck. This could help them cover more ground and understand it better. But then, on the other hand, you've got the shortcut hypothesis. This view argues that AI just makes it way too easy to get the answer without the struggle. And that struggle, that whole learning by doing thing, is where the real deep understanding actually comes from.
So, to figure out which one of these was right, researchers set up these really carefully controlled lab experiments. They took two groups of students who were learning to code. They gave one group access to a large language model, and they kept it from the other group. Then, they just measured the learning outcomes for both. The whole point was to get a clean, direct answer.
The answer they got was, well, nothing. On average, there was no significant difference in the overall learning between the students who used AI and those who didn't. And this was a really surprising result. I mean, it didn't support the tutor idea, but it also didn't support the shortcut idea. It was just neutral.
And this is where it gets super interesting. Because if the overall effect is zero, that's almost never the end of the story. It usually means something much more complex is happening right below the surface. So the real question became, what was this no-effect average actually hiding?
So the researchers dug in, and they discovered that the no-effect average was basically a mirage. It was actually the result of two completely different ways students were using the AI, with two completely different outcomes that were perfectly canceling each other out in the data.
They gave these two behaviors names, substitutive and complementary. Now, substitutive use is pretty much what it sounds like. You use the AI to just get the answer, substituting its work for your own mental effort. Complementary use, though, is different. That's when you use the AI more like a thought partner, asking for explanations, asking for examples, or just for hints to help your own learning process along.
This quote from one of the students in the study just perfectly captures that substitutive experience. The student themselves recognized that by just getting the answers directly from the AI, in the end, nothing was actually learned. The tool did all the work, but their brain didn't.
So this big distinction between substituting and complementing, well, it leads us to a really fundamental trade-off. It's a choice that every student makes, whether they know it or not, between the sheer amount of material they can cover and how well they actually understand any of it.
This slide really just lays it all out. It gets right to the heart of that trade-off. So look at that top row. When students used AI substitutively just to get answers, the volume of topics they covered went up. They were faster, for sure, but their actual understanding of those topics went down. Now look at the bottom row. When they used the AI in a complementary way, asking for explanations, their speed didn't really change, but their understanding and what they remembered later, that went up. It's a classic case of quantity versus quality. And the data makes this really concrete. The students who just relied on AI for direct solutions, well, they were able to power through the material, covering on average 1.7 more topics in the exact same amount of time. It gave them this feeling, this illusion of progress.
But here's the catch. When those exact same students were tested later, without the AI, their performance dropped. They answered almost 1.5 fewer questions correctly. And this shows that the speed they gained came at the direct cost of real, lasting learning.
But the story doesn't even end with this individual trade-off. When the researchers started looking at who benefits and who is harmed by having access to AI, a much broader and frankly more concerning pattern started to emerge.
Yeah, this chart is pretty stark. For students who started out with a high level of knowledge, AI access actually boosted their understanding. They knew enough to use it as a complementary tool to ask the right questions. But for students who were starting out with low prior knowledge, AI access actually had a negative effect. It hurt their learning. So instead of closing the achievement gap,
unrestricted AI access made it even wider.
And you have to remember, these learning effects are just one piece of a much, much larger puzzle. Using AI in education brings up this whole host of other ethical questions. I mean, we're talking about everything from data privacy and security, to bias and fairness in the AI's answers, to misinformation from AI hallucinations, and of course the huge, thorny issues of copyright and academic integrity. It's a really complex landscape with no easy answers.
So, where does this all leave us? What the research really suggests is that just banning AI probably isn't the right answer. But then again, neither is just unconditionally embracing it. The real challenge, it seems, is figuring out how to guide students, and ourselves, to use these incredibly powerful tools wisely.
So what does using it wisely actually mean in practice? Well, we need a clear strategy. First, educators need to actively teach and encourage that complementary style of use, framing AI as a tool for asking why and how, not just for getting the answer. Second, we all need to develop better AI literacy. That means understanding its flaws, its biases, and knowing how to check what it tells us. And finally, the way we test knowledge, our assessments, they need to evolve, shifting away from tasks that an AI can do in 2 seconds and toward those that demand genuine critical thinking.
Ultimately, what this all shows is that the impact of this technology really comes down to human choice. AI can be an incredibly powerful tutor, or it can be a very tempting shortcut. The tool itself is neutral. Its value depends entirely on how we choose to engage with it. So the real question isn't about the AI's intelligence, it's about ours.